South Korea thought it had its future mapped out. What it didn't see coming, the Philippines quietly rewrote the game plan. While Seoul wrestled with empty offices and factory alarms, Filipinos stepped in and changed the scoreboard altogether. Even the Korean government is now asking, wait, how did they do this? This isn't about migrant workers anymore. It's about a global power shift. If you're interested in this topic, hit the like button, subscribe, and type interested in the comments, and I will give you a heart. You know that feeling when you've been standing in the shadows, working your tail off while the world keeps handing out praise to everyone else? We've felt it. Filipinos have felt it for decades. That quiet hum of good job, thank you, when what you really wanted was you're the reason, or we couldn't do this without you. But what if I told you the world just flipped the script and didn't invite us to the party? They're studying us now because South Korea is realizing the Philippines didn't just fill gaps, they changed the game. Let's get one thing straight. South Korea isn't a small economy in crisis. It's a powerhouse that built bullet trains, global tech brands, and ultra-efficient systems out of almost nothing. And yet, even that powerhouse is now forced to ask, how did the Philippines out-adapt us? This isn't hyperbole. Seoul is scrambling. They're instituting pilot programs, adjusting visa rules, redefining foreign worker from temporary helper to strategic partner. Why? Because their future depends less on machines and more on people. And those people? Many of them are Filipinos. Here's a fact your browser should memorize. In June 2025, the Korean Ministry of Justice announced they'd bring in 22,731 additional seasonal migrant workers in the latter half of the year, just for agriculture and fisheries, bringing total seasonal migrant slots to 95,700, a 41% jump from the previous year. If you ever wondered which countries were desperate enough to rewrite their immigration playbook, it's this one. And guess who's being called in? Yes, Filipinos. Because South Korea's population decline, aging workforce, and shrinking birth rate have turned their job market upside down. So imagine this moment. You've always been told to grin and grind, to take a second seat and not ask for the mic. But now the mic is being held out for you. And what do? You don't sit, you speak. You don't follow, you lead. That's what's happening right now. Filipinos in South Korea are no longer just filling jobs. They're rewriting how South Korea defines worker, partner, citizen. Let's talk about the gravity of this shift. South Korea's fertility rate continues to plummet, projected at just 0.68 births per woman. Tell China Morning Post. There's no magic solution. They could build more factories, they could automate more services, but they can't automate purpose. They can't automate loyalty. They can't inject optimism. That's where Filipinos walk into the frame. With English fluency, caregiving ethic, global adaptability, and yes, they still pack the emotional horsepower that no algorithm can replicate. Here's a metaphor that hits. Think of South Korea's labor system like a grand luxury sports car. Perfect outside, powerful engine, but missing the one component that makes it drive, the driver. All the tech in the world means nothing if no one is behind the wheel, steering with heart, with instinct. Filipinos just climbed into the driver's seat, and now South Korea is changing the roadmap. So you might ask, okay, but how many Filipinos are we talking about? Official numbers vary, but here's what we do know. According to the Philippine DFA distribution report, there are at least 52,379 Filipinos in South Korea as of the latest count. Department of Foreign Affairs. But that number is misleading because it covers only registered cases. It does not capture the surge of skilled migrants, seasonal workers, care professionals quietly infusing themselves into Korea's system. The real number? Much higher, and the impact clear. Even more telling, South Korea launched a pilot project to import Filipino domestic workers, English-speaking women, to fill roles that Korean society no longer wants to fill. This isn't charity, this is crisis management. They're outsourcing discomfort, labor that others won't take. And they pick Filipinos because we still value the jobs others call less desirable. It's brutal when you think about it, but it's also brilliant. And let's not gloss over the irony. While Koreans debate whether foreign workers take jobs, many of their own young people sit unemployed. More than 1.2 million young Koreans aged 15 to 29 were jobless or excluded from work in early 2025. Philippine news agency. So job shortages exist, yet still the welcome wagon is for us. Why? Because Filipinos bring what the numbers alone cannot. Resilience, flexibility, adaptability, and a willingness to build systems from scratch. Now, this isn't just about South Korea needing bodies. It's about them needing people who convert instability into innovation. And Filipinos specialize in this. Nothing breaks our spirit. Systems falter, we adapt. Machines fail, we improvise. That's why South Korea is shifting from seeing us as helpers to recognizing us as strategic assets. But here's the missing piece, the real game changer. Until now, Filipinos may have been praised for humility, but band-aid words don't change history. What's changing now is acknowledgement in boardrooms, policy circles, and media headlines. South Korea is realizing that the Ukrainian industrial engineer, the Filipino agritech worker, the learning assistant in Seoul's hospitals, they're not part of the future. They are the future. And this shift, quiet, sweeping, seismic, is exactly what your parents warned you about when they said, do your job well and someone will notice. But what we learned instead is when you change the game, they don't just notice, they adjust their rule book. And right now, South Korea is handing us a pencil to rewrite theirs. So if you've felt unseen, undervalued, told your time will come while you worked anyway, watch this moment because your time just arrived. South Korea stops asking why and starts asking how. How did Filipinos become indispensable? How did the once underdog beat the odds? And how will the world react next? Comment respect if you're ready to see the global stage acknowledge what you already knew. Filipinos didn't just adapt to the world, they changed it. When South Korea first opened its doors to Filipino workers decades ago, it wasn't because they wanted to, it was because they had to. But now, things have flipped. Today, Seoul isn't just hiring Filipinos, it's depending on them, quietly, deeply, strategically. Let's zoom out. South Korea is facing a demographic nightmare that economists are calling a national emergency. Birth rates are collapsing, factories are half empty, the median age is climbing toward 45. By 2035, 1 in every 3 Koreans will be over 60 years old. It's a social time bomb. But here's the kicker. While the population shrinks, the demand for labor is exploding. And who steps in? You already know. Filipinos have become South Korea's safety net, not because we begged for it, but because we earned it. Across shipyards in Busan, care homes in Gyeonggi, and semiconductor plants in Gwangju, Filipinos are holding systems together that would otherwise collapse. Seoul's economists have finally said it out loud. Without migrant labor, South Korea's growth will flatline. And yet, this isn't just about filling shortages. This is about reshaping how the country thinks about collaboration. See, South Korea's success model used to be simple. Innovation powered by speed and precision. But when the human element started cracking under stress, burnout, and an aging society, that model fell apart. Enter Filipino culture. The exact antidote. Optimism, adaptability, empathy, the invisible glue that makes a rigid system flexible again. Take the healthcare sector. In 2025, the Korean Nursing Association reported a deficit of more than 40,000 nurses nationwide. Local graduates couldn't fill it. Many were leaving the country altogether. Meanwhile, Filipino nurses known worldwide for skill and compassion stepped in. Hospitals that once resisted foreign recruitment now sponsor entire Filipino nursing batches. Some clinics even call it the Filipino effect because patient satisfaction scores jump the moment Pinoys walk through the door. But this shift isn't limited to hospitals. Look at manufacturing. Filipino engineers trained in Japan and Singapore are now designing efficiency systems inside Korean plants. They're not just pressing buttons. They're optimizing production lines. They're doing what AI can't. Understanding the human pulse of performance. South Korea built the machines. Filipinos taught those machines how to work with people. Here's where it gets interesting. A quiet study released this year by the Korean Economic Institute revealed that productivity in sectors employing Filipino workers rose by 12% compared to all Korean teams. Not because Filipinos worked longer hours, but because they worked smarter and cooperatively. That's the intangible power of cultural intelligence, something Korea's top universities are now studying. Yes, you heard that right. Universities in Seoul are analyzing Filipino work culture. And here's a paradox for you. South Korea, a nation that once sent volunteers to help rebuild the Philippines after the Korean War, is now being rebuilt by Filipinos. That's full circle history. The helper became the cornerstone. It's poetic and a little uncomfortable for some, but it's also unstoppable. Let's put a face to this change. Meet Ria, a 32-year-old mechanical technician from Cavite working in an automotive plant outside Daegu. When she arrived, her Korean coworkers barely spoke to her. 2 years later, she's the shift leader, managing locals and foreigners alike. Her factory chief told reporters, "She fixed our workflow, not just our machines." That sentence alone tells you everything about what's happening beneath the radar. Now here's the part that makes policymakers nervous. Filipinos aren't just transforming Korea's labor force. They're influencing its mindset. Words like pakikisama and bayaninahan don't translate neatly into Korean, yet their meaning is being absorbed into workplace culture. Companies now hold team harmony days. Supervisors are trained to listen before instructing. It's subtle, but it's revolutionary. The Filipino ethos is infiltrating one of the most hierarchical societies in the world, and it's working. Still, every revolution has resistance. Not everyone in Korea welcomes the idea of foreign dependence. Some critics argue it's risky to rely so heavily on outsiders. They warn that cultural dilution could threaten Korea's identity. But here's the irony. They're missing the lesson their own history taught them. Korea rose from ashes because it embraced partnership. The same principle applies now. And Filipinos are not erasing identity, they're reinforcing sustainability. But South Korea's biggest realization isn't cultural, it's economic. Labor economists now estimate that by 2030, the loss of migrant workers would cost the Korean economy nearly $45 billion, 0 cents USD annually. That's equivalent to wiping out half of Samsung's yearly profits. The math is brutal, and it forces a truth. Filipinos aren't a labor option anymore, they're a lifeline. This is why Seoul's government is redesigning its playbook. New bilateral agreements with the Philippines are in the works, covering healthcare, construction, and technology cooperation. They're even discussing skill transfer programs that send Filipinos back home to start businesses under Korean mentorship. That's not just diplomacy, it's acknowledgement. Here's where you, the viewer, come in. Because this story isn't about statistics, it's about perspective. The world once painted Filipinos as the helpers of Asia, but in 2025, that label has expired. The new narrative is global influencer, one nation exporting not just manpower, but mindset. And South Korea, the land of K-dramas and mega brands, is quietly rewriting its script around you. But the real twist? What happens next doesn't depend on South Korea, it depends on how Filipinos see themselves. Because if we only see ourselves as employees, that's all we'll ever be. But if we see ourselves as architects of nations, the entire world starts to rebuild around us. And that's exactly what's happening now. South Korea's strategy meetings aren't just about labor, they're about legacy. And for the first time, that legacy has a Filipino face. Type Proud Pinoy in the comments if you believe this global shift isn't coincidence, it's consequence. The world's finally catching up to what we've known all along. Here's the uncomfortable truth. South Korea isn't the only country taking notes. The ripple that started in Seoul is already crashing into boardrooms from Tokyo to Toronto. Because when one nation rewrites its strategy around Filipinos, others start wondering if they've underestimated the same power all along. And make no mistake, this isn't about charity, migration, or manpower anymore. It's about influence. Silent, strategic, and unstoppable. Let's start with what's happening right now. In late 2025, the South Korean Ministry of Labor quietly proposed a multi-year partnership with the Philippines, not just to recruit workers, but to co-develop training and cultural integration programs. Their language was telling. Filipinos are not just employees, but catalysts for social balance. You heard that right, catalysts. That's corporate speak for they're holding the system together. But here's the thing, the moment one super efficient nation like South Korea admits it, everyone else in Asia pays attention. Japan is watching, Singapore is calculating, even Australia's economists are warning that without Filipino labor, critical industries like healthcare, shipping, and hospitality would grind to a halt. These countries aren't being generous, they're being honest. Filipinos are no longer optional, they're essential infrastructure. Now imagine what that means on a geopolitical level. South Korea's government is rethinking its labor dependency model because every Filipino that walks into their economy brings something no AI, no robot, no policy can replicate. Humanity, the kind that rebuilds trust between workers and bosses, locals and foreigners, the kind that turns labor into legacy. Let me paint a picture. In the industrial port city of Ulsan, a Filipino welder named Carlo became an online phenomenon when his Korean team credited him for saving an entire factory project. The video, him leading his exhausted coworkers in prayer before night shift, went viral. It wasn't about religion, it was about something Korea had been missing: spirit. When the story reached national TV, commentators called it a reminder that resilience is contagious. What they didn't say, but everyone felt, was that the spark came from a Filipino heart. And this isn't isolated. From construction sites to hospitals, that same heartbeat is being felt. South Korea's National Assembly is now drafting incentives to retain long-term Filipino workers, including easier visa extensions and even potential paths to residency. In 2010, that would have been unthinkable. In 2025, it's survival strategy. But here's where it gets deeper. While South Korea evolves to keep Filipinos, the Philippines faces its own mirror, because if other countries are realizing our people are indispensable, when will we? It's one of the cruelest ironies. The world treasures Filipinos abroad more than we sometimes value them at home. We export brilliance and import doubt. We celebrate foreign medals, yet forget the families behind them. Here's a story that hits that truth hard. 2 years ago, a nurse named Anna left Cebu to work in a Seoul geriatric center. She sent money home every month, supporting her siblings through college. Last year, her mother fell ill, and the hospital she worked for covered her travel expenses to fly home. When asked why, her Korean supervisor said, "Because she treats our elders like her own family. It's our turn." That line, "it's our turn," sums up everything shifting right now. South Korea isn't just employing Filipinos, it's learning from them. Compassion is becoming policy, humanity is becoming currency, and it's rewriting how a nation defines progress. But before you smile too wide, here's the sting. This global admiration comes with pressure. As Filipinos take on more vital roles abroad, they face heavier responsibility. They carry not just remittances, but representation. Every act of kindness, every job well done adds weight to our national image. And South Korea's recalibration proves one thing. Respect isn't given, it's built, one small act at a time. Now, let's widen the lens again. The Philippines currently supplies over 1.8 million overseas workers across Asia. Remittances hit a record $36 billion, $100 million, 0 cents in 2024, accounting for nearly 9% of the country's GDP. But those numbers don't just mean money, they mean leverage. Influence, the kind of power that forces superpowers to take your calls. And that's exactly what's happening behind closed doors. Trade ministers are linking new partnerships directly to Filipino workforce reliability. It's the quiet diplomacy of sweat, sacrifice, and skill. The irony? While big nations pour billions into AI to replace people, they're learning what Filipinos already knew. Empathy can't be coded. You can't program loyalty. You can't mass produce care. And that's what's breaking South Korea's old system and building a new one in its place. Here's where the real twist lands. This shift isn't just economic, it's cultural dominance. Filipino values, faith, family, humor, perseverance are bleeding into the DNA of industries once thought too rigid to change. Korean caregivers now start the day with Filipino-style morning prayers. Managers hold potluck-style team meetings inspired by Bayanihan. These aren't coincidences, they're conversion. Now, the question isn't if South Korea will adapt, but how far they'll go. And when that happens, when even a powerhouse like Korea starts measuring efficiency not just by output, but by heart, you'll know the world has changed. But here's the big picture. Filipinos changed it quietly, consistently, without fanfare, and now, finally, they're being seen for what they are. Not tools of progress, but teachers of it. So, to every Filipino watching this, the next time someone calls you just a worker, correct them. You're not just anything. You're the blueprint others are trying to copy. And to South Korea, thank you for noticing, but let's be clear, this isn't the start of Filipino greatness. It's the world finally catching up. Type vision in the comments if you believe the future belongs to the nations that value humanity over hierarchy, because that's the world Filipinos are already building.